Have you ever wondered if the decisions we make about our loved ones' final moments could be causing them unimaginable suffering in the spiritual realm? What if I told you that one of the most common practices in modern funeral services might be creating agony for departing souls, and that this shocking revelation comes from America's most documented and respected psychic medium? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Right now, as you're watching this video, families across the globe are making decisions about cremation without knowing they could be subjecting their departed loved ones to experiences comparable to being burned alive. This isn't some medieval superstition or religious fear-mongering. This is documented spiritual science that comes from Edgar Cayce, the man known worldwide as the Sleeping Prophet, whose psychic readings have been studied, verified, and documented for over a century. Has this ever happened to you? Have you been faced with making these crucial decisions for a family member, feeling overwhelmed by grief while trying to honor their wishes, completely unaware that timing could mean the difference between peaceful transition and spiritual torment? You're not alone, and what you're about to discover might surprise you more than anything you've ever learned about the afterlife. Through thousands of life readings conducted over decades, Cayce revealed something that should shake every person to their core. The departing soul doesn't immediately disconnect from its physical body at the moment of clinical death. Instead, there exists what Cayce termed the silver cord, an ethereal, energetic connection that maintains the soul's link to its former physical form. This isn't metaphorical language. According to Cayce's spirit guides, this connection is as real and tangible in the spiritual realm as any physical bond we understand in our material world. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Modern science is now confirming what Cayce was revealing decades before we had the technology to measure it. Recent research shows that when a person dies, their brain can continue functioning for up to 32 hours. Skin cells keep dividing for 24 hours after clinical death. Different organs and tissues shut down at completely different rates. What scientists are discovering today matches perfectly with what Cayce's spiritual sources were teaching in the early 1900s. The implications are staggering. If this silver cord connection persists, and if the soul maintains energetic links to its physical body during those crucial hours after death, then what happens when that body is subjected to the intense heat of cremation? Cayce's readings paint a disturbing picture of souls experiencing the sensation of being consumed by flames, trapped in confusion and terror because they don't yet understand their new spiritual condition. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal next will change everything you thought you knew about the death process. Cayce's spirit guides were crystal clear about one specific detail that could mean the difference between peaceful transition and spiritual trauma. If exploring these deeper spiritual truths resonates with you, consider subscribing to join our community of conscious seekers. The content we dive into here goes beyond surface-level discussions to uncover wisdom that can genuinely transform how you understand life and death. The specific guidance Cayce received was a precise 72-hour waiting period before cremation. This wasn't a random number pulled from spiritual tradition or religious doctrine. His spirit guides explained with scientific precision that this time frame allows the silver cord to naturally dissolve, preventing the departing soul from experiencing the trauma of premature separation while still energetically connected to their physical form. Think about the hidden truth behind this revelation. Every single day, funeral homes across the world are processing cremations within hours of death, completely unaware of the spiritual impact these decisions create. We're talking about a transformation that affects not just individual families, but countless souls navigating their most vulnerable moment of transition. The ripple effect of this lack of awareness extends far beyond what we can see in our physical realm. What's absolutely remarkable is how modern medical research is now validating these ancient spiritual insights with hard scientific data. Researchers have discovered that cellular death doesn't happen instantaneously. While we might declare someone clinically dead when their heart stops beating, their brain continues showing electrical activity for up to 30 minutes. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Some brain functions can persist for 32 hours, and various cellular processes throughout the body continue for 24 to 48 hours after what we traditionally consider the moment of death. This scientific evidence perfectly aligns with Cayce's descriptions of energetic connections that persist well beyond clinical death. The journey from physical existence to pure spiritual being isn't an instant switch. It's a gradual process that requires time for complete disconnection. These revelations force us to completely reconsider our understanding of death itself and the decisions we make during those critical hours. Behind the scenes of every funeral home decision, there's a spiritual reality most people never consider. When families choose immediate cremation, often driven by practical concerns or simply following standard procedures, they're unknowingly making choices that could profoundly impact their loved one's transition experience. The mindset shift required here is enormous. We need to start viewing death not as an ending that happens in an instant, but as a transformation process that unfolds over days. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because what Cayce revealed about the actual experience of souls during premature cremation will completely change how you think about these final decisions. The documented cases he provided through his readings paint a picture that's both disturbing and enlightening. Write in the comments, "This changes everything," if you're starting to see death and cremation from a completely different perspective. The documented cases reveal experiences that challenge everything we think we know about the death process. Cayce's spirit guides explained with remarkable technical precision that vibratory forces within the physical body don't simply vanish at the moment of clinical death. Instead, these energetic frequencies continue influencing the departing soul for anywhere from 48 to 96 hours, with the average being that critical 72-hour window we discussed. Picture this transformation like invisible cables connecting your spiritual consciousness to the physical matter you've inhabited for decades. These aren't metaphorical connections. According to Cayce's readings, they're as real and tangible in the spiritual realm as any physical bond. Your soul has spent years, maybe decades, completely integrated with your body's energy field. The journey of separation requires time for these connections to naturally dissolve, like untangling countless threads that have been woven together throughout a lifetime. But here's where the hidden truth becomes even more impactful. Not every soul experiences this transition the same way. The mindset and lifestyle choices we make during our earthly existence directly influence how smoothly this separation occurs. Cayce revealed that souls who lived very materialistically, those deeply attached to physical possessions, status, or purely material concerns, often experience what he termed earthbound conditions after death. These earthbound souls remain psychically attached to physical realm experiences, unable to easily release their connection to the material world they knew. Imagine someone who spent their entire life focused solely on accumulating wealth, physical pleasures, or material achievements. Their consciousness has become so intertwined with physical existence that releasing these attachments becomes incredibly difficult. The transformation from physical to spiritual being requires a complete shift in their understanding of reality itself. Behind the scenes of this spiritual transition, these materialistic souls face the greatest risk during premature cremation. Their strong attachment to the physical body means the energetic connections persist longer and more intensely, When cremation occurs before these bonds naturally dissolve, the experience becomes exponentially more traumatic. It's like forcibly severing connections that the soul isn't ready to release, creating confusion, terror, and genuine suffering in the spiritual realm. The revelations become even more startling when we consider how common this scenario really is. Our modern culture often promotes materialism and physical attachment as measures of success. Many people live their entire lives without developing spiritual awareness or understanding their true nature beyond the physical body. The impact of this lifestyle extends far beyond earthly existence. It directly affects their ability to transition peacefully. Now, I want to explore exactly what these souls experience during premature cremation, because Cayce's documented cases provide chilling details about the actual sensations and emotions these spirits endure when their physical remains are subjected to intense heat while still energetically connected. Write in the comments, "I never knew this," if you're realizing how much our earthly choices affect our spiritual transition. The documented experiences become even more disturbing when we understand Cayce's fundamental teaching about human nature. He consistently emphasized that the body physical, the body mental, the body spiritual are one. This isn't just philosophical poetry, it's a description of how consciousness actually functions. During our earthly journey, these three aspects become so completely integrated that separation creates inevitable confusion, especially when that separation happens under traumatic circumstances. Behind the scenes of what we call death, there's a complex process of disentanglement that requires careful navigation. When the physical form is subjected to intense heat, while these subtle connections still exist, the confusion intensifies exponentially. The soul's entire framework of understanding reality gets shattered in an instant, creating disorientation that can persist for extended periods in the spiritual realm. But here's the most shocking revelation from Cayce's documented cases. When cremation occurs too soon, spirits can experience the exact same type of suffering as if they were being burned alive in their physical body. This isn't a metaphorical description or symbolic language. According to his readings, souls who carry strong attachments to their material body or harbor deep fear about the dying process literally feel the flames consuming their consciousness. The mindset we develop during life becomes our reality in death. Think about someone who spent decades completely identified with their physical appearance, their bodily comfort, their material possessions. Their consciousness has become so intertwined with physical existence that they can't conceive of being separate from it. The transformation required at death demands a complete shift in their understanding of who and what they are. But this shift takes time. If this information provided clarity or peace of mind about such an important topic, a like helps. Ensure others who need this knowledge can find it. Your support creates ripples that reach families who might be making these crucial decisions right now. The hidden truth about psychological attachment reveals itself most dramatically during premature cremation. A soul very attached to the body or deeply invested in materialism remains psychologically connected to their physical remains even after clinical death. When those remains are cremated while this psychic link persists, they experience the sensation of being burned along with the body. Their consciousness interprets the destruction of their physical form as happening to them personally. The impact of this experience extends far beyond momentary discomfort. Imagine the terror and confusion of a spirit that, without fully understanding their new condition, feels they are being consumed by flames. They're caught between two realities, no longer fully physical, but still energetically connected enough to experience the trauma of their body's destruction. The journey they should be taking towards spiritual understanding gets derailed by intense suffering that could have been completely avoided. The revelations become even more profound when we consider that this isn't speculation or theory. Cayce documented specific cases where families later received communication from departed loved ones describing exactly these experiences. Souls reported feeling trapped within the fires, requiring extensive spiritual intervention and healing to overcome the trauma of premature cremation. Now, I want to reveal something that might bring tremendous relief to families who have already made cremation decisions without knowing these guidelines. Because Cayce's teachings contain incredibly compassionate guidance for these situations that changes everything about how we should view past choices. Write in the comments, "This is mind-blowing," if you're starting to understand how real these spiritual experiences actually are. The Cayce terror experienced by unprepared souls reveals the profound impact our earthly mindset has on our spiritual journey. Imagine being thrust into a completely unfamiliar reality without understanding the rules or even recognizing that you've transitioned from one state of existence to another. These spirits often don't immediately comprehend that they've died. They're caught in a liminal space, still feeling connected to their physical form, while simultaneously experiencing sensations they can't explain or escape from. When premature cremation occurs during this vulnerable state, the confusion becomes overwhelming. The soul feels the intense heat consuming what they still perceive as their body, creating genuine terror that reverberates through the spiritual realm. This isn't a brief moment of discomfort, it's a traumatic experience that can affect their entire transition process and spiritual development for extended periods. But here's where Cayce's revelations become incredibly compassionate and reassuring. The hidden truth behind these teachings isn't about creating fear or guilt around cremation choices. Cayce clarified with absolute certainty that cremation itself is completely legitimate and carries no spiritual condemnation whatsoever. The method of body disposal doesn't affect the soul's eternal destiny or spiritual standing. Divine love doesn't judge families based on these practical decisions. The transformation in understanding this brings is enormous. The issue isn't the cremation process itself, it's purely about timing. Behind the scenes of what appears to be a simple logistical decision lies a profound opportunity to demonstrate love and consciousness during one of life's most sacred transitions. The journey from physical to spiritual existence deserves our most careful and loving attention, not because we're bound by rigid rules, but because we have the knowledge to make choices that minimize suffering. What makes this waiting period so crucial involves the presence of what Cayce called spiritual benefactors or ministering angels. During those vital 72 hours, these spiritual helpers have precious time to assist the newly departed spirit in their adaptation process. Think of them as cosmic guides who specialize in helping souls understand their new reality and release their earthly attachments naturally and peacefully. The impact of having this assistance cannot be overstated. These spiritual benefactors work behind the scenes to create what Cayce described as protective vibrations around the departing soul. They help confused spirits understand that they've transitioned from physical existence, guide them toward acceptance of their new spiritual state, and most importantly, help them release the energetic connections that still bind them to their former body. The revelations about this process show us that death isn't a solitary experience. There's an entire support system in the spiritual realm dedicated to making this transformation as smooth and peaceful as possible. The 72-hour window allows these ministering angels to complete their work effectively, ensuring that when cremation does occur, the soul has been properly prepared and disconnected from physical attachments. Now, I want to explore something that brings even more hope and understanding to families who are dealing with these decisions, because Cayce revealed specific guidance about creating the most supportive environment possible during this critical transition period. Write in the comments, "Angels are real," if you're beginning to understand the spiritual support system that exists during death transitions. The personal transformation that comes from understanding these spiritual principles completely changes how we approach end-of-life decisions. Whether you're planning for a loved one's transition or contemplating your own eventual passing, having this knowledge shifts your entire mindset from reactive decision-making to conscious, informed choices. The journey toward death becomes less about following standard procedures and more about creating the most supportive environment possible for a soul's spiritual transition. But here's the hidden truth that makes these revelations so powerful. They're not designed to create anxiety or burden families with impossible expectations. The impact Cayce intended was exactly the opposite. His spirit guides emphasized repeatedly that these teachings exist to offer knowledge, not to generate guilt in families who have already made different choices or who face circumstances beyond their control. Behind the scenes of every family's decision-making process, there are countless factors that influence timing and options. Financial constraints, legal requirements, family dynamics, and emergency situations all play roles in determining what's possible. The spiritual realm understands these human limitations completely. Divine love and understanding encompass all circumstances that prevent ideal compliance with these recommendations, because the intention behind our choices matters more than mechanical adherence to specific protocols. What's remarkable about the practical implementation of these principles is how accessible they've become in modern funeral services. In the United States, where Cayce conducted his work, crematories routinely offer the option of keeping bodies in cold chambers for extended periods. This advancement in funeral technology means families can comply with the 72-hour recommendation without any legal complications or additional stress during an already difficult time. The transformation in funeral industry practices reflects a growing awareness of spiritual considerations alongside traditional logistics. Many funeral directors report that spiritually minded families commonly request 3 days of waiting, with some requesting up to 7 days when circumstances allow. Regulations generally permit bodies to remain in refrigeration chambers for as long as families desire, making these spiritual guidelines completely feasible within existing legal frameworks. This practical accessibility reveals something profound about how consciousness and spirituality are gradually integrating with conventional business practices. The funeral industry's willingness to accommodate these requests shows that ancient spiritual wisdom can coexist harmoniously with modern conveniences. The journey toward more conscious death practices doesn't require revolutionary changes, just informed choices within systems that already exist. For those who appreciate content that bridges ancient wisdom with modern understanding, subscribing ensures you won't miss these profound explorations. Together, we're building a space where spiritual knowledge meets practical application in meaningful ways. The revelations about timing flexibility also provide tremendous relief for families navigating these decisions. The VAI 72-hour recommendation represents an average, not an absolute requirement. Individual circumstances, spiritual development, and family needs all contribute to determining the most appropriate approach for each unique situation. Now, I want to reveal something absolutely extraordinary that validates these teachings in the most incredible way possible. How a completely independent spiritual source on the other side of the world received identical guidance about cremation timing, providing stunning confirmation that we're dealing with universal spiritual truth. Write in the comments, "This gives me peace," if you're feeling relieved to know these principles can actually be implemented practically in real-world situations. The growing spiritual awareness among families today reflects a profound shift in how people approach death and dying. Behind the scenes of funeral planning, more families are questioning traditional timelines and seeking guidance that honors both practical needs and spiritual considerations. Some crematories report that spiritually minded families commonly request 3 days of waiting, with others requesting up to 7 days when their circumstances allow for extended reflection and preparation. This transformation in mindset reveals something deeper about humanity's evolving relationship with death. The journey toward more conscious dying practices shows that people are no longer satisfied with purely mechanical approaches to end-of-life decisions. They want choices that reflect their understanding of death as a spiritual transition rather than simply a logistical challenge. But here's the hidden truth that makes these teachings even more compassionate and practical. The 72-hour guideline isn't absolute and rigid. Cayce's readings emphasize that each soul meets its own self in transition, meaning individual spiritual development determines much of the death experience. The impact of a person's earthly consciousness, their spiritual preparation, and their level of attachment to material existence all influence how smoothly they can release their connection to physical form. This revelation about individual differences transforms our understanding completely. A soul that spent years cultivating spiritual awareness through meditation, service to others, and conscious living will naturally experience an easier transition regardless of external circumstances. Their journey towards spiritual reality began long before physical death, making the separation process more natural and less traumatic. The flexibility built into these principles reflects divine wisdom rather than arbitrary rules. Behind the scenes of spiritual law, there's an understanding that consciousness itself varies dramatically from person to person. Someone who lived their entire life in fear of death and complete identification with their physical body might need longer than 72 hours for natural separation. Conversely, a spiritually developed soul might release these connections much more quickly. What's truly important is understanding the principle rather than rigid adherence to specific timing. The revelation here focuses on offering sufficient time for the separation between spirit and matter to occur naturally and with minimal trauma. The mindset shift required involves seeing death as a process that deserves our patient, loving attention rather than something to be handled as quickly as impossible. This principle-centered approach eliminates the anxiety many families feel about following exact protocols. The impact of understanding these guidelines as loving suggestions rather than absolute requirements creates space for families to make decisions based on their unique circumstances, while still honoring the spiritual needs of their departed loved one. Now, I want to share something absolutely remarkable that provides stunning validation for everything we've discussed. How a completely independent spiritual source in Brazil received identical revelations about cremation timing, creating one of the most extraordinary confirmations in the history of psychic research. Write in the comments, "Flexibility with love," if you appreciate how these spiritual principles adapt to individual needs rather than demanding rigid compliance. The ultimate revelation in Cayce's teachings transcends all specific protocols and timing guidelines. More important than any rigid rule is the environment of love, respect, and spiritual understanding that surrounds the entire transition process. The transformation in perspective this brings is profound. It shifts our focus from mechanical compliance with procedures to creating an atmosphere of genuine care and consciousness during one of life's most sacred moments. Behind the scenes of every spiritual transition, the energy and intentions of those present carry tremendous impact. Prayers, positive vibrations, and what Cayce described as harmonious thoughts create a protective spiritual atmosphere that can be far more beneficial for the departing soul than mechanical adherence to any specific timeline. The mindset of love and reverence generates its own powerful influence in the spiritual realm. The hidden truth about family involvement reveals something extraordinary about how consciousness affects consciousness. The prayers and positive thoughts of family members don't just provide comfort to the living, they create actual, protective vibrations around the departing soul. These loving intentions form what Cayce called a spiritual shield that helps guide the soul through their transition process, regardless of external circumstances. This understanding completely transforms how we view our role during a loved one's passing. We're not passive observers waiting for procedures to be completed. We're active participants in creating the energetic environment that will influence their spiritual journey. The decisions we make about timing matter, but the love and consciousness we bring to those decisions matter even more. A like on this video tells me that diving deep into these spiritual principles created value for you. It also helps connect this wisdom with others who are seeking understanding about life's most profound transitions. But here's where Cayce's teachings become incredibly compassionate for families dealing with guilt or regret about past choices. There is absolutely no spiritual condemnation for families who cremated loved ones without knowing these guidelines. Divine love and understanding encompass all circumstances beyond human control. The spiritual realm recognizes that most families make these decisions during periods of intense grief, often under time pressure, without access to this specialized knowledge. The impact of this compassionate perspective cannot be overstated. Many families carry unnecessary guilt about choices they made in good faith, worried that their lack of awareness somehow harmed their departed loved one. Cayce's readings consistently emphasize that genuine love and caring intentions are what matter most to the spiritual world. When families act from a place of love, even without perfect knowledge, that love itself provides protection and guidance for the departing soul. The journey toward understanding these principles should never become a source of self-criticism for past decisions. The revelations are meant to offer knowledge for future choices, not to create regret about circumstances that couldn't be changed. What's done with love is blessed by divine understanding, regardless of specific protocols followed or missed. Now, I want to share the most incredible validation of these teachings that exists, how a Brazilian medium named Chico Xavier received virtually identical guidance about cremation timing from completely different spirit sources, creating one of the most remarkable confirmations in spiritual history. Write in the comments, "Love is what matters," if you understand how genuine caring transcends any specific rules about cremation timing. The profound impact of genuine love and positive vibrations from family members often surpasses any protocol followed mechanically without real understanding. This revelation transforms our entire approach to end-of-life decisions. When families gather around their departing loved one with sincere care, heartfelt prayers, and conscious intention to ease their transition, that loving energy creates more powerful protection than rigid adherence to any specific timeline followed without emotional connection or spiritual awareness. Behind the scenes of these spiritual principles lies a fundamental truth about consciousness and intention. The energy we bring to any situation directly influences its outcome, and this is especially true during the delicate process of death and transition. A family that maintains vigil with genuine love, even if they can't wait the full 72 hours due to circumstances, generates protective vibrations that can compensate for timing limitations. The hidden truth about these teachings reveals they're not about superstitious rules or arbitrary restrictions designed to create anxiety around death. These are principles of love and charity applied specifically to minimize suffering and maximize favorable conditions for the spirit's adaptation to their new reality. The transformation in understanding this shifts our focus from rule-following to love-expressing, from protocol compliance to conscious compassion. The mindset that emerges from this understanding completely changes how we approach funeral decisions. Every choice becomes an opportunity to demonstrate care for the departing soul's well-being rather than simply handling logistics efficiently. The journey through grief becomes infused with purpose when we realize our decisions and intentions can actively help our loved one's spiritual transition. But the most compelling evidence for these principles comes from the documented cases Cayce recorded during his readings. In one of his most disturbing sessions, he encountered a soul experiencing profound confusion because cremation had occurred within hours of death. The entity reported feeling still within the fires long after the physical cremation was complete, unable to understand why this sensation persisted or how to escape from it. This particular case required extensive spiritual intervention from guides and healers in the spiritual realm. The soul's confusion stemmed not just from the premature timing, but from their complete lack of preparation for death and their strong identification with physical existence. The impact of their materialistic mindset combined with immediate cremation created a traumatic experience that affected their spiritual development for an extended period. The revelations from this case illustrate exactly why the waiting period serves such a crucial purpose. During those vital hours, spiritual helpers work behind the scenes to prepare the soul for separation from physical form, helping them understand their new condition before any potentially traumatic procedures occur. Now, I want to explore the most extraordinary validation these teachings have ever received. How an independent medium on the other side of the world received identical guidance about cremation timing, creating unprecedented confirmation that these principles represent universal spiritual truth. Write in the comments. Evidence is powerful if you're amazed by how documented cases validate these spiritual principles. The most disturbing documented case in Cayce's records involved a materialistic spirit who experienced the sensation of being trapped in flames during immediate cremation. This soul had lived their entire earthly existence completely identified with physical possessions, status symbols, and material achievements. Their consciousness was so deeply intertwined with physical reality that they couldn't conceive of existence beyond their body. The transformation required at death became exponentially more difficult because their entire sense of identity revolved around material form. When cremation occurred just hours after their physical death, this spirit felt every sensation of the burning process as if it were happening to their conscious awareness. The terror and confusion they experienced lasted for months in spiritual time, requiring extensive intervention from healers and guides in the spiritual realm. Behind the scenes of this case, we see how the soul's earthly mindset directly created their post-death experience. Their materialistic beliefs became their spiritual reality. The journey toward understanding and healing for this soul involved gradually recognizing the psychological nature of their sensations. The flames they felt weren't actually burning their consciousness. They were experiencing the trauma of forced separation from physical attachments they weren't prepared to release. The impact of this revelation transformed their entire understanding of existence itself. What makes this case particularly significant is how it illustrates Cayce's teachings about the etheric body, the energetic template that maintains connections with physical sensations during the crucial first 72 hours after death. This etheric body serves as a bridge between physical and spiritual existence, gradually dissolving as the soul adapts to their new reality. When cremation occurs, before this natural dissolution process completes, the departing consciousness can still experience physical sensations through these energetic connections. The hidden truth about this etheric body explains why premature cremation becomes traumatic for departing souls. They're caught between two states of existence, no longer fully physical, but still energetically connected enough to experience what happens to their former body. The revelations about this intermediate state provide crucial understanding about why timing matters so significantly. Modern scientific research continues validating what Cayce revealed decades before we had technology to measure these processes. Medical studies now confirm that cellular death doesn't occur immediately upon clinical death. Different organs and tissues shut down at completely different rates, with some brain activity persisting for 30 minutes. After the heart stops and various cellular processes continuing for hours afterward. The transformation in our understanding becomes complete when we realize that consciousness itself may persist far longer than previously believed. Recent neurological research suggests that awareness can continue well beyond what we traditionally consider the moment of death, supporting Cayce's descriptions of sustained connections between soul and body. Now, I want to reveal the most extraordinary confirmation these teachings have ever received. How a Brazilian medium working completely independently received identical guidance about cremation timing from entirely different spirit sources, creating unprecedented validation of universal spiritual truth. Write in the comments, "Science confirms spirit," if you're amazed by how modern research validates these ancient spiritual insights. The transformation in consciousness research reached a breakthrough moment in 2023 when advanced brain imaging studies revealed that consciousness may persist for extended periods after clinical death. These cutting-edge neurological investigations use sophisticated monitoring equipment to track brain activity far beyond what previous technology could detect. The revelations emerging from this research validate exactly what Cayce was describing decades before we had any scientific framework to understand these phenomena. Behind the scenes of these studies, researchers discovered that certain areas of the brain continue showing organized activity patterns long after traditional markers of death occur. The impact of these findings completely revolutionizes our understanding of the death process itself. What we've traditionally considered the definitive moment of death appears to be just the beginning of a gradual transition that unfolds over time. The hidden truth about consciousness persistence becomes even more compelling when we examine the work of Dr. Sam Parnia at NYU Langone Medical Center. This leading researcher in near-death experiences has documented cases where patients reported detailed awareness of events occurring around their bodies for extended periods after clinical death. These aren't vague spiritual experiences or religious visions. They're specific, verifiable observations that patients made while clinically dead. Dr. Parnia's research methodology involves rigorous scientific protocols to verify these consciousness experiences. Patients describe conversations between medical staff, specific procedures performed on their bodies, and even details about people entering and leaving the room while they were clinically deceased. The journey toward understanding these phenomena requires abandoning our preconceptions about when consciousness actually ends. What makes this scientific validation extraordinary is how precisely it aligns with Cayce's spiritual revelations from the early 1900s. The mindset shift required involves recognizing that consciousness and brain function operate on different timelines than we previously understood. Modern neuroscience is essentially catching up to spiritual insights that were documented a century ago. But the most powerful demonstration of these principles in action comes from a documented case in Virginia Beach in 1967. A family familiar with Cayce's work faced the decision of cremating their patriarch, who had been a long-time student of these teachings. They understood the spiritual significance of timing, but felt uncertain about implementing the guidelines during their time of grief. Through a medium familiar with Cayce's work, the family received guidance that perfectly aligned with the 72-hour recommendation. They decided to wait 3 full days, during which they maintained vigil with prayers and readings from Cayce's materials. The transformation this decision brought to their grieving process was profound. They felt more complete and peaceful in their farewell. Several weeks later, through the same medium, they received communication from their departed family member expressing genuine gratitude for the waiting period. He described how this time allowed him to release gently from physical attachments and understand his new spiritual condition before the cremation occurred. Now, I want to explore how these principles apply universally, regardless of religious background, and reveal the practical guidance that emerges from understanding death as a spiritual transition rather than merely a biological event. Write in the comments, gratitude from beyond, if you're moved by how departed souls can actually appreciate the conscious choices their families make during transition. The profound impact of family involvement during the transition period reveals one of the most beautiful aspects of these spiritual teachings. The thoughts and prayers of loved ones don't just provide comfort to the grieving, they actually create what Cayce described as protective vibrations around the departing soul. This understanding transforms our role from passive observers to active participants in facilitating a peaceful spiritual transition. The energy generated by genuine love and conscious intention forms a tangible shield in the spiritual realm. Behind the scenes of every death experience, there's an invisible network of support that extends far beyond what we can see. When families gather with sincere hearts, offering prayers or simply maintaining loving presence around their departed loved one, they're contributing to what becomes a collaborative healing process. The transformation this brings shifts our entire perspective on grief from helpless suffering to purposeful service. But here's the hidden truth that provides tremendous comfort for families facing impossible circumstances. When emergency situations or legal requirements prevent the ideal 72-hour waiting period, divine law operates through love and understanding rather than rigid adherence to specific rules. The mindset of compassion and the intentions behind our choices carry more weight in the spiritual realm than mechanical compliance with protocols we can't control. The revelations about divine flexibility show us that love and prayers can compensate for unavoidable circumstances. A family that maintains vigil with genuine care, even if they can only wait 24 hours due to legal restrictions or emergency conditions, generates protective energy that can bridge the gap created by shortened timing. The journey through these difficult decisions becomes less about perfect compliance and more about expressing authentic love within whatever limitations exist. What's remarkable about implementing these principles today is how the modern funeral industry has evolved to support spiritual considerations alongside traditional logistics. Most states already require 24 to 48-hour waiting periods for legal documentation and preparation, bringing standard practices closer to spiritual recommendations. Many funeral homes now offer extended refrigeration services specifically to accommodate families requesting longer waiting periods for spiritual reasons. This transformation in funeral industry practices reflects growing awareness that death involves more than just biological processes. The impact of consumer demand for spiritually conscious services has created new options that didn't exist even a decade ago. Behind the scenes, funeral directors report increasing numbers of families inquiring about extended waiting periods, meditation spaces for vigils, and other accommodations that honor spiritual transition needs. The practical accessibility of these guidelines eliminates many concerns families have about implementing spiritual principles during their most vulnerable moments. The journey toward conscious death practices doesn't require revolutionary changes to existing systems, just informed choices within frameworks that already exist. Now, I want to explore the most extraordinary validation these teachings have ever received. How a Brazilian medium working completely independently received virtually identical guidance about cremation timing, creating unprecedented confirmation that we're dealing with universal spiritual principles rather than cultural beliefs. Write in the comments, love bridges everything. If you understand how genuine caring can overcome practical limitations during end-of-life decisions. The Hidden benefits of implementing these spiritual guidelines extend far beyond helping the departing soul. Funeral directors consistently report that families requesting longer waiting periods often experience a more complete and peaceful grieving process. This transformation in their healing journey reflects something profound about how conscious decision-making affects everyone involved in the death experience. When families take time to honor spiritual principles, they create space for deeper processing of their loss and more meaningful connection with their loved one's transition. Behind the scenes of this extended grieving process, families describe feeling less rushed, more contemplative, and ultimately more at peace with their final goodbye. The impact of having additional time to sit with their emotions, share memories, and maintain presence with their departed loved one creates lasting benefits that extend well beyond the immediate crisis of death. But here's where these teachings receive their most extraordinary validation. Halfway around the world from Edgar Cayce, a humble Brazilian medium named Francisco Candido Xavier, known as Chico Xavier, began receiving virtually identical guidance about cremation timing from completely different spirit sources. Xavier started his mediumistic work in the 1930s and continued until 2002, working entirely independently from Cayce's legacy in Virginia Beach. When Xavier appeared on Brazil's famous television program Pinga Fogo in 1971 and was asked about cremation, his response was almost word for word identical to Cayce's guidance. Speaking through his spiritual mentor Emmanuel, Xavier stated that cremation is legitimate for all who desire it, provided there's a waiting period of at least 72 hours. The exact same recommendation from two psychics who never met, living on different continents, receiving information from completely different spirit guides. This remarkable convergence reveals the hidden truth about spiritual principles. They transcend cultural boundaries and individual belief systems. The transformation in understanding this brings shows us we're dealing with universal laws rather than personal opinions or cultural traditions. Both Cayce and Xavier's spirit guides emphasized repeatedly that these principles apply to all souls, regardless of their earthly religious beliefs or denominational affiliations. The journey toward implementing these guidelines ultimately points to something even more profound. The revelations about cremation timing, while important, represent just one aspect of conscious dying. The ultimate preparation for peaceful transition doesn't lie in following specific protocols, but in cultivating love, service, and spiritual awareness during our daily earthly existence. The mindset we develop through years of conscious living becomes our foundation for navigating death successfully. Spiritual development during earthly life remains the primary factor determining post-death experience, making our daily choices about how we treat others and how we understand our spiritual nature the most crucial preparation of all. Now, I want to explore the practical guidance that emerges from combining both Cayce's and Xavier's teachings, revealing specific actions families can take during those critical 72 hours to create the most supportive environment possible for their loved one's spiritual transition. Write in the comments, 2 sources, 1 truth. If you're amazed by how independent spiritual revelations validate these universal principles, the practical guidance that emerges from combining these teachings creates a roadmap for families navigating one of life's most profound transitions. During those crucial 72 hours, the atmosphere surrounding the departing soul becomes as important as the timing itself. Reading spiritual literature aloud, playing soft music, maintaining what Cayce called harmonious vibrations, and encouraging thoughts of liberation all contribute to creating optimal conditions for peaceful transition. The transformation in perspective these revelations bring extends far beyond funeral planning. Understanding death as a gradual spiritual process rather than an instant termination changes how we live our daily lives. The journey toward conscious dying begins with conscious living, cultivating compassion, developing spiritual awareness, and maintaining connection to our higher nature while still embodied. Behind the scenes of every earthly existence lies the ultimate preparation for transition. The choices we make about how we treat others, how we handle adversity, and how deeply we develop our spiritual understanding become the foundation for navigating death successfully. The impact of this realization shifts our focus from fearing death to preparing for it through meaningful living. What makes these teachings so powerful is their practical accessibility, combined with profound spiritual depth. Whether you're planning for your own eventual transition or making decisions for loved ones, this knowledge provides a framework for choices based on understanding rather than convenience, consciousness rather than mere tradition. If you found value in exploring these spiritual principles together, I'd appreciate you subscribing to continue this journey of discovery. The conversations we share here dig deep into topics that matter for both our earthly experience and our spiritual development. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you made it through this entire exploration with me. Your presence here, taking time to understand these profound teachings, created the energy that made sharing this information meaningful. If this content resonated with your understanding of life's deeper mysteries, a like helps connect these insights with others who might benefit from this knowledge. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, exploring how to prepare spiritually for your own peaceful transition. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey toward conscious living and dying has only just begun.